As well as this, tonight we can reveal that we are committing to 9 key pledges which our states members will seek to implement if they are elected. And each of these pledges is tangible, deliverable, and affordable. We have done our homework on these, and we know that they can be enacted. So let's go through them. Our first pledge is on the living wage, where we are committing to raise the minimum wage to the living wage, and we will start this by raising it to £10 an hour on the 1st of October this year. Now, this pledge stems from the very basic principle that everyone is worth a living. No person in any job deserves to be paid an amount which leaves them in poverty. But also, it's because Jersey has now become uncompetitive here. We have a minimum wage which is lower than the UK. In fact, such is the indignity of it that our minimum wage has even fallen behind Guernsey. Now, we cannot expect to be able to recruit people into traditionally lower paid roles if they know that they can get a better quality of life elsewhere where the cost of living is lower and in fact the minimum wage is higher too. This pledge is absolutely necessary. And I can confirm that we already have the proposition to do this drafted and confirmed with the state's graph authorities, and we're committing to you that if our states members are elected on the 22nd of June, we will lodge this proposition on the afternoon of the day that our members are sworn into office. This proposition will therefore become a key part of the negotiation platform for the next government of Jersey, and it will be clear right from the very outset which politicians are genuinely committed to raising the minimum wage and which think that it's just something worth saying in a campaign to attract your votes. So if you are a minimum wage worker, vote Reform Jersey for a pay rise in October. The second pledge is on the housing crisis, and our pledge is that we will declare a housing crisis in the first week of office and require officers to implement our housing crisis action plan as a matter of urgency. So let's be very clear on this one as well, that despite what some politicians have claimed recently, Jersey does have a housing crisis, and it is causing real hardship across our society. And there has been far too much complacency from the current States Assembly, which time and time again has refused to adopt propositions that have been aimed at alleviating this crisis. Now, from what I've seen so far, it seems that other parties believe that the solution to the housing crisis is to just build more homes. They say that it's basic supply and demand. But I would ask the question, how come, since the last census, the number of homes has increased by more than the number of households, yet the cost of housing has never risen at such a fast rate? In fact, it is not as simple as supply and demand. And Reform Jersey understands the reality, which is that if we are to alleviate this crisis, we need to take bolder action than is proposed by others. And our Housing Crisis Action Plan sets out in detail our proposals to tackle this crisis. That will include proper rent regulation, which is evidence-based and shown to work in other jurisdictions. It will include proper support for first-time buyers and ending the obscenity of using publicly owned land to build homes which get sold on to investors to rent at extortionate rates. That is our land, and we should be using it to meet the needs of our population. I can also confirm that it will involve establishing a fund to support first-time buyers to acquire their first homes through shared equity. We are prepared to use every lever the government has to resolve the housing crisis. Our next pledge is on affordable healthcare. We will expand the health access scheme so islanders with long-term illnesses can access cheaper GP appointments. And we will work towards abolishing the fee entirely for all islanders. We believe that healthcare is a right, and it's one which should be free at the point of need. And we believe that the evidence shows that this leads to better health outcomes, and it leads to saving costs in the long run, as you can help people in the earlier stages of their illnesses, rather than waiting for it to get too bad and they suffer and it's more difficult to help them. Now, we are particularly proud as a party of the achievement that we made in this term of office to get cheaper GP appointments for many parts of our society. It is because of the hard work of our members that people who are on income support, people who are classed as pensioner plus, and children are able to seek cheaper appointments with their GP now, and that is making a real difference for those people. We believe this should be extended to everybody. The next pledge, and I'm particularly excited about this one because it's one that you would, I think, expect from Reform Jersey, but which actually wasn't clearly in our manifesto, but I'm pleased to say we've done our homework on this and know that it can be delivered. We will remove GST from food and essential items. We have always believed that the principle of taxing food is wrong. It's regressive, and it ends up requiring more people to claim benefits just to make ends meet. But it's extra timely now because we have seen a drastic rise in the use of food banks, including by many people who are actually in full-time work. And also the recent decision from the States Assembly to exempt period products from GST shows that the old argument that we must keep GST on everything because it's too complicated to take it off is complete nonsense. Our next pledge. We will ensure that all states' primary schools provide a hot and nutritious meal daily for all of their students by September 23. I think that perhaps one of the saddest moments in this term of office was when Deputy Ward fought in a government plan debate to acquire the funding necessary to roll out the school meals programme into all states' primary schools, and we were very narrowly defeated on that. The advantage of having done that proposition previously, though, is that it means we've already done the homework. We know how this can be implemented, and we know how much it will cost to do so. And in fact, the cost of extending this to all states' primary schools is about £500,000. Now, if you're wondering why that figure might sound familiar, it's because coincidentally, it happens to be the same amount that we paid out to the former CEO when he left employment with the government. I will say that our priorities are a little bit different to the incumbents. Our next pledge. We will reform our tax system to ensure that taxes are progressive and fair. This will include raising the top rate for the highest earners, reducing it for middle earners, and protecting the lowest earners. Again, this is a proposition which we have done our homework on, which we have been in deep consultation with the Treasury Department to know that it is possible, it can be done, and to know what the revenue implications for it are. So the detail of this policy is that we will seek to put all taxpayers onto the same tax regime, the marginal relief system, where all taxpayers can claim tax allowances, and by applying that as well to the highest earners who currently have their liability capped at 20%, it means that we will be able to afford to reduce the basic rate from 26% to 25% and still have a surplus at the end of it. That will put more money back in your pockets. And let me be absolutely clear that you will hear in this campaign from those who oppose Reform Jersey that secretly our policy is to raise taxes on all of you because we want you all to pay more. The detail of this proposition shows that that is complete nonsense. Our tax policy leaves the vast majority of people in Jersey better off, and the only people who are left worse off by it are those who really are at the very top of the income scale. Our next pledge is for improved public transport. Now, this pledge is to renegotiate the contract for Jersey's bus service to provide more accessible, affordable and environmentally friendly public transport alongside active travel options. Now, Lindsay mentioned before the very popular policy that we're proud to have won in the States recently, which was Deputy Ward's proposition to introduce a £20 bus pass for under 18s. At the last count, we'd heard that around 3,000 young people had applied for this pass and were benefiting from the independence that gets them and the families benefiting from the reduced cost. Now, that was a particularly satisfying victory because we were told time and time again, Liberty Bus is an independent company and you can't tell them what to do. Well, the states ignored that advice and told them what to do anyway, and guess what? They did it. So their contract, we know, is up for renewal during this term of office. And we know that because of the climate crisis and Jersey's obligations now to reduce our carbon emissions, with traffic powered by fossil fuels being the biggest contributor to our carbon emissions in Jersey, encouraging more people to be able to use the bus and promoting more active travel options as well will be a key part of that. Our next pledge is for energy efficient homes. We are committing that we will establish a programme to support households to transition to low carbon heating systems. Now, as I said, fossil fuel powered transport is the biggest cause of carbon emissions in Jersey. It is in fact heating homes, which is the second biggest carbon emitter. Many homes out there don't have adequate insulation. Many are using gas heating, which of course we know is bad for the environment as well. We are aware that there is funding aside in the Climate Emergency Fund, which will enable us to support households who are struggling to afford to make their homes more energy efficient with some subsidies for that. And we will also seek to make sure that that is done on a progressive basis so those on the lowest incomes are able to receive more support to do that. That will not only help Jersey meet our obligations on reducing carbon emissions, but at the end of it, it will reduce your energy bills, and that's got to be a good thing. Our final pledge is on government accountability. We will establish a public services ombudsman to enable islanders to seek real redress when failed by a government service. Now, this proposal for a public services ombudsman was made in the Independent Jersey Care Inquiry, which laid bare many of the failings there had been over a long period of time in our public services, and they said to us that it ought to be a priority to have a system in place so that when people are failed, there is an avenue which they can go down to seek redress. And that has the side effect of actually keeping the government on its toes and making sure that it improves services so people don't end up in a situation where they feel they ought to complain about it. This is unfortunately one of those things that got put to the side because of the COVID pandemic. Reform Jersey is committing in this term of office, we will pick it back up and we will have that public services ombudsman in place so that all islanders can have confidence that if public services don't work for them, they have some form of redress. So, if you've been counting along, those are our 9 pledges.